Check, check, mic check. Check, check, mic check. Welcome to Podcast Envy. I'm your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder, and I am here today in person, real, like face-to-face across the desk with my good friend, colleague, collaborator, Aqua Zumba partner, Lauren Ramsey.
That's me.
I laughed when I said your name, so nobody can understand what I said. Lauren Ramsey from Betsy Bash. And we are here because all things are new. It's the end of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
I released maybe like 2 or 3, maybe 4 episodes of Podcast Envy in this entire calendar year.
Oh, wow.
Which is like nothing. The show's been sleeping. And part of the reason it's been sleeping is because I have been spending this year figuring out what it is that I want to say, what I want to do, how I want to help people, what's next. And now we're at the end of the year.
Yeah.
New Year's coming. Everybody wants to change things. Everybody wants to start things. Everybody wants to try new things.
Right.
Everybody wants to set goals. What's one thing that's new with you?
Oh my gosh. Hot yoga.
Is that actually new?
I guess it's not new because I did it pre-pandemic, but it's the first time I'm going back post-lockdown.
All right. So we're not just here to talk about hot yoga and Aqua Zumba and all things getting fit and getting in shape.
Right. It's very new year, new me of me to say.
Dislike new year, new me. It's always judgmental. It's always new year, new you. You need to change. You need to improve. You need to do better.
Everything about you sucks. Now change.
Correct. Why is marketing so judgmental?
It doesn't have to be.
Well, and that's exactly what we're here to talk about is good marketing that's fun and not judgmental and effective and useful. And that's part of what I wanted to shift for the new year for our podcasting clients and for our future podcasting clients. And that is more effective social media marketing for your podcast, for your show, for your brand, for your message.
Yeah. I mean, social's not going away. You know, and it's only getting more complicated.
Well, maybe Twitter's going away.
Oh, I hope not. I love Twitter. Twitter has such a special place in my heart. I looked it up the other day because I was nervous that it was going to go away when he fired all developers. And I've sent over 19,000 tweets from just one Twitter account that I have.
That gives me anxiety.
That's how much I love Twitter.
So, listener, what you will recognize really quickly is that Lauren loves social media and Andrea does not love social media. This is very clear.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I feel that social can be fun. And it also feels necessary for my business, which makes it more challenging to be fun for me.
Right, because it's more of like an exercise or a task sometimes, right?
Yes, it's like something that I should be doing more of, and I should be doing it in a certain way instead of just using Instagram the way that I like to use Instagram, which is the old school way of just making a very lovely photo and getting artistic about it and posting like clever little caption. But that nobody's going to see this because it's not a selfie and it's not a reel and it's not a story and it doesn't have video and it doesn't have sound.
Right. It's a very confusing time for millennials right now. It's like what we knew and what we knew as social has changed.
And also, I have noticed as I look around the podcasting space, and this is with clients, this is with myself, this is with other people in Facebook groups and forums and other podcasters who I know, other coaches and strategists who I know, is that there's always this debate around how do I grow my audience? How do I get more followers? I keep making audiograms and posting them on social media. And by I don't mean I because I haven't created any content. I mean, I, the proverbial podcaster complaining about their lack of audience growth. I keep making audiograms, which for anybody who doesn't know what that is in this day and age of podcasting, it's when you take an audio clip from your episode and you feed it into software, possibly Headliner, possibly Descript, and you have a still image and it creates like a little animation, a waveform animation. And perhaps captions and you post it as a video, but it's really just a graphic that goes with your audio clip. Post it on whatever platform you want. And they're very cool. They're very fun to make.
Yeah.
A lot of podcasters use them, but then they're like, I keep posting audiograms for my new episodes and my audience numbers aren't growing. I'm not getting more listeners. I'll ask you, Lauren, why is that happening? What's wrong with that strategy?
Right. Oh my gosh, so many things. But I think one of the things that is the biggest struggle right now for anybody on Instagram that's trying to have their posts be seen is that Instagram is a very saturated marketplace. It's been around since 2010. So 12 years old at this point. And so anybody that's really tried to launch a new profile on that platform in the past probably 2 years has probably struggled to get to 1,000 followers. And a big percentage of that is the algorithm. So in order to get followers, people need to see your posts and know that you're out there. And only about 10 to 20% of your followers are going to see your posts. So if you're hovering between 200 and 400 followers, that's, not very many people seeing your posts. And how do you convert that small amount into followers? It gets to be a very challenging game. The solution can lie in a couple different ways. One is definitely to put a paid strategy behind your Instagram strategy, because that's really what they want. They want your money.
And they equals evil Meta.
If you pay them, your posts will be seen. I can tell you that. But more importantly, Facebook ads, they work. They really work. Facebook is still the number one platform in the world. Facebook runs Instagram. Instagram ads come from the Facebook backend system. So don't lose heart, I think is what I'm trying to say. If you want to stay on Instagram and Facebook, you can absolutely do that, but you have to have a paid component if you want to reach those follower goals and new listener goals.
And then even before looking at your paid strategy on those platforms, I think there's also a fundamental underlying problem with the thinking that is, I have a podcast, I want to grow my audience, I need more podcast listeners, therefore I need to blast out my new episodes on social media because someone is going to see my post on Instagram and then immediately go subscribe to or follow my podcast in a different app.
Right. People are lazy. Asking someone to go from one app to another app is a big ask. Back in the early days of social media, it wouldn't have been as big of an ask. But now there's more social media apps. There's more distractions. People's attention span has limited down to about 2 to 3 seconds. So it's a big ask. But if you're running ads that are built and optimized for getting people to download an app, then it's going to also be served people that do that behavior regularly. And that won't be a big ask for them. But just asking the general population without any paid strategy behind it at all is putting yourself in a huge challenge, when there's a better strategy that would help you get that done much faster if it's implemented correctly.
And also, I would say that even me, I'm like a podcast power listener. I listen to so many podcasts. Some are for research, some are for client purposes, some are for enjoyment, some are for falling asleep, some are for learning. I listen to podcasts all day long for all kinds of different reasons. And even when I am on Instagram, I'm not usually looking for something to listen to as a podcast in that moment. I'm on Instagram for different reasons.
Sure.
However, there are a lot of podcasters who I do listen to who I also follow their content on Instagram. And so I think about them more because they're showing up in more than one place.
Yes. And in different ways.
In my brain.
Right. And, I think you touched on a good point about why are people on Instagram? And is the content that you're creating helping them feel good about what they're doing on Instagram? Do they want to learn something? Do they want to just be entertained? Do they want to feel a part of your world? Do they want to feel like you relate to them? And all of those are different types of content completely. And so I think if you match your content and your strategy to who you're trying to reach, then it's an easier game.
And because you're reaching your audience in different ways, in different places, when they're in different frames of mind and they're looking for something different and you're serving up what it is that they're looking for, the real secret of this is that even though I'm already a listener of that person's podcast, let's say the person who's popping to mind right now is Farnoosh Torabi on So Money podcast. And she's been doing a lot with reels on Instagram. I think maybe she's been doing TikTok too, though I'm not on TikTok, so I don't really know. But she's on my mind a lot. And what's interesting about that is that, Farnoosh isn't on. Okay, I'm going to take a guess. I'm not inside her brain or her strategy, but I'm going to guess that she is not on social posting these reels expressly for the purpose of getting more podcast listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Getting more podcast listeners benefits her for sure.
Yeah.
Because she has ads on her show, and that's part of her monetization strategy is ads. So yes, more listeners equals bigger dollars from advertisers. But ultimately, I think Farnoosh also wants people to buy her calendar for the new year. Her show is now part of CNET. So CNET as a whole wants more of her audience on their content.
Sure.
And so she doesn't need me to become a new listener by looking at her social, but she does need me to engage more with those other avenues that are available that are part of her brand and her mission and what she's trying to do. Buy her book, buy her calendar, go to CNET, follow her here, follow her there. Like all of that adds up to what she ultimately wants her audience to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Audiences have a variety of needs. I think if you can give them more than one thing to engage with you on, then you're helping match yourself to that audience in multiple ways.
Yeah. So like if you are my client, Sarah, because I know Sarah won't mind me talking about her. My client, Sarah Bueno, she has a podcast called Conversations with a Wounded Healer. Sarah is a licensed clinical social worker. She is currently a private practice owner, therapy practice owner in Chicago, but she's in the midst of selling that practice. So she started her podcast many years ago with me as a practitioner. And now she's selling that business. She is no longer going to be growing her private client base, but she's moving more into a coaching and strategy model, consulting with practice owners. So now instead of supporting individuals within a therapy practice, she's going to be supporting the practice owners with their own sustainability goals, business, personal self-care, all that sort of thing, so that they can serve their clients. And now, yes, Sarah needs to get more listeners for her podcast. Sure, everyone wants to grow their number of listeners for their podcast, but Sarah's not necessarily selling ad space on her podcast. So then the question I would ask her is, well, why do you want more listeners?
Yes.
If you have 100 people, which she has way more than 100 people listening to her show. But if you have 100 people listening to your show, or if you have 500 people listening to your show, why does that matter?
Mm-hmm. What's the next goal?
Yeah, like what's the next goal? Like you want them to do what?
Right.
As a result of engaging with your content, listening to your content, knowing who you are. And if that goal is, I want therapy practice owners, one, my charitable mission, my goodwill mission is I want them to be more successful and take care of themselves and not get, to burnout so quickly. And if that's my purpose, can I help my audience do that whether or not they actually ever go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and listen to my podcast? And also, if my goal is to find therapy practice owners who want to sign up for my coaching services, can someone find me through my social media content to sign up for those services in the same way that they can find me through my podcast to sign up for those services? It's like they don't have to necessarily listen to the full podcast in order to do the thing you want them to do.
Right. Social media is a tool for that. Kind of like you said, it doesn't have to be the same message over and over again for the singular goal of new followers. It can expand past that into multiple goals and with a good content strategy.
And part of that content strategy can come from the podcast.
Yes.
So it's like, yes, social media can feed people to your podcast, but also the podcast content can feed your social media strategy.
Yes.
So it's like a cycle instead of a funnel.
Yes. That's content remarketing, right? It's like you've already put all this effort into recording the episode. Now what else can you do with those words?
So we were talking about Instagram, but it's not specific to Instagram and Facebook, right? There's many, many social platforms. Are you offering services now for Mastodon? I'm just kidding. Do you have any stats for how you've helped people grow their reach on Mastodon?
I had someone ask me this week, what my thoughts were on Be Real ads and when ads were going to start happening. And it made me more sad than I thought it was going to. I was just like, oh my gosh, another thing to think about.
No.
I mean, I think that's a struggle as marketers. It's just that as soon as we learn the algorithm, it changes. And as soon as we master a platform, there's new ones. And, that's also kind of the fun of social media is it's never stagnant. So as someone who's into technology and into social, that is exciting, but sometimes it does get overwhelming. But I would say, I think my favorite platform right now is TikTok. I know you're not a super fan of TikTok, but there's a lot of benefits to TikTok for business owners as well. And that's where I really see the excitement for me in my business, is launching small businesses on TikTok in a smart way that will help them grow their business with an algorithm that's completely fresh. TikTok has been around for years. I've been on TikTok since 2017, but small businesses really aren't yet. Mm-hmm. And I think this year is the first year small businesses started paying attention to TikTok. I think that was largely in part because they passed Google as like the number one search back in last year, December or whatever. But, now they have 1 billion users and it's not going to slow down. So I think business owners that joined TikTok this year and started their strategy are going to have dividends that pay for years, just like people that join next year. But I think past next year, we're going to start seeing that saturation start to come into play, and then it becomes more and more tricky to get organic reach.
And what about YouTube? Because I know I have definitely seen a trend of more and more people are asking me about video and asking me about YouTube. And I am also very curmudgeonly when it comes to video, which is surprising because that's what I studied in college. And I've done video production.
Sure.
I've made short films, before I was ever a podcaster. And every time somebody says video, I'm like, oh. Because it feels like such a heavy lift to go from audio podcast production. For the average home podcaster, it feels like a heavy lift to go from well-produced audio podcast to well-produced, at least what I would call a well-produced video podcast.
It is a big lift. And I think sometimes those asks come from seeing success from bigger podcasts, right? Not the best example, but I always think of Joe Rogan. I know. See you rolling your eyes over there.
Oh, Joe.
Oh, Joe.
You all can go back and listen to an earlier episode that I recorded about that guy.
Yeah, we don't like him, but he does also record his podcast as a video.
And he's super successful. And so you look at that and you're like, I could do that. And you don't
But he didn't start there.
And you don't know what goes on behind the scenes and how many people he has working for him.
And how much money he's
spending on ads. What kind of budget he
has.
Yes. And all those things.
So it's like, don't put the cart before the horse kind of thing. It's like you could do video on Instagram. Instagram is begging people to create reels. They've prioritized you in the algorithm if you create a reel. They spent $1 million investing with creators to make reels this year. They're starting to say that basically if you don't start posting reels, they're going to downgrade all your content in the algorithm. So do video, please do video, but you don't have to do what Joe Rogan is doing. You don't have to mimic something, but do it in a way that makes sense to your brand and to what your audience wants. And maybe what your audience wants is a behind the scenes of you filming your podcast or a day in the life with me when you talk about the issues that you solve for people. And that's a lot easier than a huge YouTube lift.
Yeah. I do think that there is a place for YouTube and that there's a way to use it. I just don't think it necessarily looks like filming all of your podcast interviews and putting them up as like a talk show or something like that on YouTube.
Right.
Necessarily. But what I'm hearing as you're talking, I mean, we've had a zillion conversations about this already, but even in this conversation, what I'm hearing you say is that with your social media strategy as a podcaster or as anyone, but as a podcaster, with your social media strategy, there's part of it that's about having fun and experimenting.
Totally.
There's part of it that's about using strategies that are effective, which requires experimenting and looking at the data, because what might be effective for one user might be totally different than another one.
Absolutely. I mean, we see different types of content perform for our clients in completely different ways. And it's wild, but it all comes down to the audience.
And then the third part is trends.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's like, what are the algorithms pushing for? And I know for me, as someone who my business is not social media, And that is not the primary thing that I want to occupy my brain. That is not what I want to spend my time and effort on. I can't really be bothered to keep up to date on all of the trends and the algorithms and what is and isn't performing. Like I can't, it's too much
hard.
compared with everything else. And so I imagine that's where hiring someone like you might come into play.
Yeah, because I was just going to say, like, that's one of the reasons we only focus on social, because it's already complicated enough, like we keep on top of all those trends and the algorithmic changes so our clients don't have to. And it certainly makes their lives easier.
And that is really why we are here having this conversation right now, is not just to, have a great conversation about social media that inspires all the podcasters to go out there and be prosperous on social with their shows, or relieve the pressure of feeling like you have to start filming your interviews and putting them on YouTube as like video podcasts. But also because I focus on making awesome podcasts. Yeah. That is what I do best for my clients. Mm-hmm. And I started this year to feel the pressure to be able to come up with better social media strategies for them because they were frustrated by the results that they were getting.
Sure.
Or they were just completely overwhelmed by what it felt like it took to get the results that they wanted. And I felt like I should be able to find a solution for you. I should know how to use social better. And then I was like, wait a minute, no, this is not what I do. This is not what I want to do. But I also see how helpful it can be and how important it is. And so what did we decide to do?
We're going to work together.
Woohoo! We're calling it Working Title.
Yes,
Working Title, The Creative Bash.
I love it so much.
The Creative Impostor Studios and Betsy Bash. It makes sense, right?
Absolutely. And it's like the purpose for the word bash in my name, which I always am like, do people know that it's supposed to be a party?
Yeah. Well, say more about that. Say more about what is your brand? What is your company?
Sure. So,
what is the Bash? Who is the Betsy? Because sometimes when I talk about you, people think your name is Betsy.
Yes. Yeah, that happened yesterday, actually. Someone called me Betsy like multiple times, and then they got an email from me and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Your name is not Betsy.
Incorrect.
Like, it's fine. I'm the business at the same time. So, whatever. But no, so Betsy Bash, the name, is inspired by my grandmother's. I once asked my grandmother when she was having her 60th birthday, I was like, what was your favorite age? And she said 35. And I thought, really? I think I was in my 20s at the point. And I was like, I just thought 35 was ancient. I was like, I think I want to be 27 or 28 forever. But now that I've passed 35, I'm like, that's a great answer. 35 was a great year.
A nice vintage.
Yes. Yeah, right. But what I did with Betsy Bash is I timed it to that era of the world. So when my grandmother was in her 30s, it was the 50s. And so the branding is very 50s related. And Betsy Bash as a character represents both my grandmothers and the lessons they taught me, which is always be yourself and always know your etiquette. And for social, that transforms into know the trends, know how people expect you to show up on Instagram versus TikTok. And it is very different. And people give you about 2 seconds to do it right these days. So if you don't show up correctly, you'll lose all of that work. That work goes nowhere, right? All that effort becomes useless. So that's the name behind Betsy Bash. And the bash part was like party, because when I originally started the company, I wanted to do a lot of live events and do like live tweeting because that was a big thing back then. I built a what was it called? A tweet competition, basically, where like anybody that was tweeting during the event, it would go up on this big screen and then we would count them and we could say who tweeted the most and they would be the winner. And
my anxiety is rising again.
So very long answer for who and what Betsy Bash is. Yeah.
And so we thought, well, why don't we team up?
Yeah.
And give our clients 2 brains, not for the price of one. Do not mistake me on this.
We still have to eat.
We still have to eat, and our teams still need to eat.
Yes.
However, to give you 2 brains at once, because what I saw for clients who do have a social media team is that their podcasting team is separate from their social media team, and the business owner or the podcaster is in the middle trying to translate things from one to the other. And I think that there's a duplication of effort and cost.
Sure.
And time, like meeting with your social media team versus meeting with your podcasting team. And then it's like, I'm looking at your social media and I'm like, this strategy doesn't even match with your podcast. Where is your podcast in this? Or you're looking at the podcast and you're like, wait, you have this whole other thing on social media. Why don't they match? Why aren't they working together?
Yeah. And that's what people are looking for. That branding has become very, very, very important. And transparency is also very important. So if one thing feels one way and another thing feels another way, you're going to start to give people the feeling that things aren't right. And you don't want that feeling.
Yeah. And so it's like that branding is not just the colors and the fonts and the names of things. It's also the voice, the calls to action, what you want your audience to do, how you're supporting them. There's a whole thing to like message branding and audio branding that I think for too long, a lot of us has just been thinking of social and podcast as separate or as one leads to the other rather than both are synergistically. I think that was a word like 2 years ago. Yeah. Synergy. Wasn't that like a word of the year or something? Yeah. Synergistically working together to help guide your audience to the thing you want to guide them to.
Yeah, because ultimately they're both marketing tools.
Yeah. And so what does that look like? Full transparency, we're not 100% sure yet. We are working on creating our packages right now and how that will work. And part of it will be a little bit of an experiment in the same way that podcasting is an experiment and social media is an experiment.
100%.
In looking at how can we really work to the benefit of our clients, either in a strategy and consulting capacity. So for those of you who are already producing your show and you already have a production team that you're happy with, but maybe you're not happy with the growth or you're not sure that the strategy is on point, or you're asking that question of, I just don't know if my podcast is really working. Like I like making the podcast and I have listeners and people tell me they love it, but I don't know if it's working.
Sure.
And I think that happens on social media too. It's like, yay, I got a bunch of new followers and I'm posting all this content, but I don't know if it's working.
Yeah. Metrics are hard to set up sometimes, especially if that's not like your zone of genius, We spend a lot of time.
We just said zone of genius earlier before we started recording. And yes,
we'll circle back to that.
Callback.
Yeah. But we spend a lot of time working on reports every month because that's important. The data needs to drive the next decision. And if you're coming from a place where social is already not in your wheelhouse, then I can take the leap to say that like data analytics on social are also not on your wheelhouse, right? So that puts you in a very like disadvantaged position if you're trying to use social to build this goal for your podcast. And so we just want to solve that. We want to help people put these strategies in place that are going to work and that are going to help them reach their goals and not, cost $1 million.
So strategy is definitely one way that we're looking to help support podcasters and brands who are podcasting. And so we're developing an audit process for existing shows. Most people who podcast have some sort of social media.
Sure.
So looking at what do you already have in place, what's already working, what do you want to be working, what's not working, and figuring that out from an audit standpoint. We're also looking at creating a strategy for new podcasters, people who are launching a brand new show, so you can start off on the right foot.
Yes.
So you can hit the ground running and not be like, okay, great. Now we have 5 episodes. Now how do I grow my show? Where it's integrated from the beginning. So it's not like something that you have to figure out later.
Right. Or reinvent.
And then we're also looking at implementation because it's not just about strategy, right? We can do full production services. It's something we already do for our clients on the podcasting side. But then, Lauren, can you talk a little bit more about what your done for you management services look like?
So we can do just about anything in the social space. We do a lot of organic posts for our clients where we populate their feeds for them and implement the right strategies to reach their goals. A lot of video that goes out on the feeds as well. And then we support their work with ads and create that from the ground up and manage it for them through reporting on it. And a couple of our other favorite things to do are community management or social selling, as people are calling it these days. But that basically means we're you on the internet. And so we're going out on your social pages as your brand or as your business and responding to your customers, helping them with whichever questions that they have and finding new listeners or customers for you based on your audience. So if we know your audience is XYZ, we'll look for XYZ on Instagram and pull those people to us through, being friendly.
Yeah. So we're looking at how can we offer those production services together so that you can have one marketing meeting that we're all at and we're all on the same page. And then behind the scenes, you're not having to send your podcast to your social media person to chop up. Like all that can happen behind the scenes where it can happen more seamlessly, because Lauren and I will be moving files back and forth and communicating with our teams and our support staff.
We both know like what the other person needs, you know? So there's also not that like rework of, well, we're down to the wire and now my social media person is telling me that they need these things, but I didn't ask my podcast person for that because I didn't know it. And then all that stress comes into play and things get pushed and things get missed, right? But we'll be working from the get-go together. So I'm like, hey, Andrea, when you do this, will you do this too? And done, you know, and same thing for me. And so it's working smarter.
Scrooge McDuck always said, work smarter, not harder. Now you will all know exactly how old I am.
The DuckTales song is playing in my head currently.
Lauren Ramsey, why are you excited to work with the Creative Impostor Studios?
Oh my gosh. Well, I love you, first of all.
Aw, shucks.
I always tell people this, and Andrea always makes a funny joke after, but Andrea was my first friend that I made in Chicago. So, you know, you've been a big part of my life since I moved here about 7 years ago. But I think this makes sense. We want to be building strategies that are helping businesses exceed and meet their goals, you know, in ways that are fun for us. You know, there's so many ways to implement a social strategy, and it doesn't have to be one size fits all, you know, and because everyone is different, everyone's audiences are different, everyone's budgets are different, everyone's time limits are different. And so one thing that we're really good about is being super flexible on what this solution needs to look like right now. And maybe it changes in 6 months or a year, but right now, this is what it needs to be. So we're really excited about helping podcasters get those listeners that they're looking for, get those followers that they're looking for, and feel good about their social presence. I think so many people that talk to me about social media woes, they feel defeated. You know, they feel like they've put all this effort and energy into showing the world who they are and no one's listening. And that sucks. You know, you don't want that feeling. And it's not because no one wants to hear what they're saying. And it's not because what they're saying is not interesting or not relatable. It's because they're fighting against a huge algorithm.
They just don't know where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we've got the tools and tactics to beat that algorithm on your behalf so that you can start feeling good about all this stuff that you're putting out there, because people will start listening and engaging.
I once was watching a training with Michael Port, who trains on public speaking primarily. He has a whole program called Heroic Public Speaking. And public speaking is something that comes naturally to me. It's something I enjoy doing, but I wanted to learn how to get better at it. And one thing he said, that this was years ago that I was watching this training, one thing he said that stuck out to me is he said that people come to him and they're like, I just want my speech to be good. I just want my talk to be good. I want my session to be good, my keynote, whatever it is that you're delivering. I just want it to be good, or I want to be good. I want to be a good speaker. And he's like, here's the secret. You can't be good. You can only be helpful.
I like that.
And I think that for so long, I wanted my clients' podcasts to be good. Like, you have an amazing podcast. Your sound quality is awesome. Your content is so good. You're an amazing interviewer. What you're saying, your message is so important. But it's only as good as it is helpful. Sure. And it's only helpful if people know how to find you.
Yes.
So what I would suggest you do is, if all of this sounds very interesting and you're having these light bulbs popping up in your head like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for. Hallelujah. This is exactly what I have been missing. Because I will tell you that I've been having conversations with people who are like, wait, tell me more about how that works.
Yeah.
Wait, because I was thinking of hiring a separate social media person. Wait, this makes so much more sense. I think this is what I need. If that sounds like you and that's what's happening in your brain right now, go take a look at the show notes. There will be a link for you to share some information about what you got going on with us. You can reach out, answer a couple of quick questions, and we'll reach out to you to schedule a call to talk about what it is that you need, what might work for you, and see if we can offer you an integrated service that will very specifically meet your social podcasting needs.
Yeah.
Is that what we should call it? Social podcasting?
Oh, social podcasting. I kind of like that. I think it like marries what both platforms are great at, right? It's like Social gives you a way to connect with people that you don't know in a very meaningful way, if done right. And podcasting is a very intimate experience, like you're a part of their day, you're in their ears, like they're tuned in. And so combining them both with a similar strategy, I think is just a win-win.
Podcast Envy is produced by your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder. That's me. The Podcast Envy theme music is by Valentin Sosnitsky, courtesy of the Free Sound Project at freesound.org, and our podcast Angel music is by Benjamin Mastropolito, also on freesound.org as Lemon Cream. All music is licensed under the Creative Commons. Our episodes are mixed by Edwin Ruiz, and hey, if you want your show to sound as good as ours, hire us. Put the magic audio mojo of the Creative Impostor Studios to work for you. Thanks so much for listening, and here's to making your podcast the envy of everyone else.